This is Pixelish. I'm your host, Wolfgang Bremer. On today's inaugural episode, I'm welcoming Brett Wakefield, a senior design manager at SAP. We are talking about the responsibilities of a senior design manager, managing up, down and sideways, the seniority gap, why saying no is good, taking effective breaks, and more. It's great to have you on the show, Brett.
Thanks for having me, and long time no talk, eh?
Yeah, long time. We met at SAP in 2016 or 17, was it?
Wow, that was that long ago already, was it? Yeah, probably about then, for sure.
Yeah, I think you were one of the people who actually interviewed me. That was really interesting. Good times.
Yeah, over the Zoom or whatever, which is now quite the common thing to do, you know. Back then it was like, oh, interview over Skype. That's a bit awkward, but yeah, now it's quite common.
Yeah, nothing else allowed anymore. How times change.
Very much so.
So you are still at SAP. What are you doing there?
Oh, geez, yeah. I've been at SAP for some time now, probably close to 10 years.
Wow.
Which is, yeah, I know, and it kind of goes by in an instant, and you don't realize how long you've been there for. But right now, I'm currently a senior manager of the design team in Vancouver specifically, but I guess that's now more of a global role. And our focus is analytics and planning. So I've worked on analytics for the last 10 years, and planning is relatively new. I mean, we've always had a little bit of it in the application, so it's always been there, but I've never really had to lead it or drive it. But yeah, I'm always open to new challenges, so we'll just take this one like we took the rest of them, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
New challenges are always, they keep you on your toes and they keep you, engaged in the job, so they're never a bad thing.
Always good to have some kind of stability and challenge, I guess, is the mantra, right? Otherwise it gets boring, and if not, then you know what you're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons, to be honest, why I've been at SAP for so long. It's just the design problems are always very complicated. And I think that in combination with some of the typical large enterprise problems, some of the users we get to talk to or some of the large scale problems are always really challenging. And I think that's one of the reasons why, I stay in the job, is because there's always something to learn and there's always, a challenging problem to try and solve, and it never gets kind of dry. So yeah, like you said, it's good to have challenges. Otherwise you kind of get burnt out or just don't care anymore,
Yeah, for sure. Wow, that sounds really like a complex and complicated topic, as you said. But so, as a senior design manager, what exactly do you do? I mean, you probably have to juggle a lot of things, manage a lot of things, right? So,
yeah, no, for sure. That's a great question. It's interesting because a lot, especially during COVID, and a lot of the time more recently, I really struggle internally with this job and my previous job just as a manager of a design team. It's hard to anytime you get a new job, it's hard to understand what the scope of that job is and understand, right, for whoever your manager is at the time or whoever your organization is that you're supporting, what are the top 20% of the things that you need to do and how you can be the most valuable in your role, right? And you can't do everything, obviously, so you have to pick and choose. And this is something during COVID where I've really struggled personally, just because I like to accomplish things, right? I like to get things done. So as a designer, it was quite easy. You have a list of design tasks you need to do or problems you need to solve, and you mock them up, or you meet with colleagues and you sketch them out, and then you come up with an idea, user test it, solve some problems. But at the end of the day, you have something tangible to show for that, and then it's it's an artifact. You can do with it what you want. You can share it, you can put it in a drawer somewhere, but you have it and it's done and it's completed. And
right.
As a manager, it's sometimes I spend my entire day just responding to emails or playing the politics that the job involves, and that's really hard for me because I don't, at the end of the day, I'll like jump outside and cut the lawn or like paint a wall in my house or like, do some house chores or something, just because that will make me feel like I've accomplished something, even though it's not work related,
Yes.
So yeah, in my current job, obviously I have a team. I'm actually just took over the senior management role. So this team is relatively new, although I know the people. And then in my previous role as a manager, I had a lot of employees in Vancouver, I think 8 or 9. And then I had 3 employees in Ireland. And for both jobs, I think that the challenging thing is balancing how to be a good people manager versus how to be on top of product and be a lead for product design, right? And at SAP specifically, they kind of expect a lot of managers, I think, from this regard. In the past, I've had some people managers that had no idea about the product, and I've also had managers who are very product focused and don't really care about people. And there's pros and cons to both, obviously, but you got to strike that balance somewhere. But I think it's really hard in these roles to advocate the time to the people and make them feel like they're succeeding and engaged, and ultimately that's what's going to make the team successful, right? Especially during a pandemic when people are able to work remotely at different companies, and they're able to I think things are just a bit more flexible, right? And so it's easier for employees to leave to go elsewhere because there's no longer that in office engagement with their friends or their colleagues, right? So it's very much about the content and the work and how much they get paid, and a lot less about is the office in the right spot? Is it, do I like being downtown Vancouver? Do I like being in Toronto or wherever else you are, right? I think that used to play a lot more into that decision that most people make. And now it's really just like, okay, well, I'm at home regardless. So how much money do I make? And is the topic interesting, right? And I think depending on what you work on at SAP as well, when some of our employees work on, maybe some of it more dry topics, it can be tough. And I know right now for us, we're going through a major refactoring in the code. So from the UX side, it just means a lot of development support, which isn't the most fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of nitty gritty stuff. And so, as much as we can try and engage people on topics, they're not really seeing their work make it to, production line. So it is a challenge. It's a huge challenge. And so, it's my responsibility to keep people engaged and make sure the team's growing, and happy and have things to work on and have challenges all the time. So I don't know, it's tough. And sometimes I think one of my faults is that I don't necessarily think of that work as being productive. And so there's some days where I finish work and I'm just like, oh, I didn't do anything today. Like, man, this is terrible. But but at the end of the day, I did spend multiple hours with every person on the team, just talking and listening to them, whether it be work related or personal related. And giving them your attention is often more valuable than some of the things that you could do. So
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, especially during a pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah, especially during a pandemic, exactly. I think it's like, yeah, as you said earlier, you like to do some house chores because you see that you have a tangible result in the end. But if you talk to people and you make them feel heard and understood, and you care for them, it doesn't feel like almost you have something to show. For example, in the evenings, I like to do the dishes, because in the end, as you said, you see you have accomplished something, you have something to show. Here's a clean stack of plates. Great.
Totally. Yeah.
But after talking to people, you just have this feeling that you feel good inside for a while, because you were able to help somebody most likely. But I find sometimes it's not so obvious, it's almost like sometimes I personally need more quiet time just to reflect and think about what did I do today and to realize, yes, I actually managed to help somebody today, I think, or I hope.
Yeah.
And that then gives me this kind of feeling that, yes, actually, I think I was productive today. But for me, it took a while to get to that point. It's not something you can just see, basically.
Yeah, definitely. It's it's hard to remember sometimes, yeah, exactly what you said. It's just realizing that and taking the time to realize that and knowing that, because I spent all day talking to someone, I might not be up to date on what I need to know for, whatever meeting's coming up tomorrow or whatever customer engagement I have. But at the end of the day, trying to weigh that value over keeping your employee engaged and happy is something, there's something to be said for that, right? And I honestly think a lot of the times companies take that for granted, and we all know how, I'm sure we've all had managers we don't like working for, right? So it makes your job and your life a lot worse when you don't have a supportive team or a supportive manager. So yeah, trying to do that job and be there for the team is definitely important to me, and just trying to rationalize that in the day-to-day is something that I definitely need to work on, and being mindful of that, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, I think we all had bad managers and good managers. And I think it's probably also a cultural thing sometimes, because I find during my time in Vancouver, I found people are, I want to say, more open, more friendly, than the Germans. So I can make jokes about it because I am
No.
German, but
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
like these kind of things. I think sometimes at least there's some kind of component to it. But that being said, can you share any tips or tricks? How do you engage with your team, or how you find time, or how you make sure that people are in the right spot?
Oh man. Yeah. I think this is a tough question. I mean, I grew up with my dad being a manager, a software manager specifically. So,
Right.
for the longest time, I had no idea what he did when I was a kid. I knew he was an engineer, and I just thought he drove trains around and things like that. But whenever I went into the office to see him, he was always just talking to people, or at home he was just talking to people, and I was like, man, like, but he doesn't do anything. All he does is talk to people all day. Um, but because I've had a father as a manager for my entire life, I've picked up a lot of things from him just naturally that I mean, I wouldn't say I had to physically learn them or anything, but one big thing that I've picked up is just to let people talk and ask questions about themselves, right? The better you can get to know someone, and the more engaged you are in their just their everyday life, I think it builds trust, and that will help you in the work scenarios as well, right? And so, I mean, one thing I like to do is when I try to meet my employees once a week, or if I can't make that happen, at least once every second week, and just talk. And it doesn't have to be about work, right? It can be about anything that's going on. And some people, they do like to focus on what's going on with the content or what's going on with work. But I think I always try and ask what's going on in their life first, or just see, what, even so easy as like, oh, what did you do on the weekend? It sounds kind of dumb, but like it does go a long way, and I think people become a lot more comfortable, and they end up opening up about other problems they're having and challenges, right? Because at the end of the day, what I want to know is just how are things going, and I want them to be honest with me, if it comes to not happy in my job, or I need help with something, and a lot of the time people are afraid to ask for help, especially some of the more junior employees, and the more you can build trust with them and really show them that you care, I think the easier it is for them to ask for help, or to ask if something is needed from me, right? A lot of the time you say, okay, do you need anything from me? And I was like, no, 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 I'm good. But like, you can see that they're struggling. So I think it's trying to get them to open up and come to some conclusions themselves, without having to pry.
For sure. Yeah, I think the human factor is very important being a leader, a manager. As you say, especially when there's like a seniority gap, maybe that's a term, I don't know, between
Yeah,
junior and you
yeah,
being a senior manager, you feel like sometimes maybe not approachable enough in that sense.
yeah, totally.
And as you describe it, you need to, I don't know, get the people to understand you're there for them, you're there to help them. And I think that's
Yeah,
what you're doing. Yeah.
yeah. No, for sure. And I think, like, I mean, I'm quite young to be a senior manager. Or at least I used to think I was quite young, but I have been around for 10 years at SAP. But um, when I first started the job as a manager, even it was really challenging for me, just because many of the people that I managed were quite a bit older than myself, and had quite a bit more years experience in the industry, right?
Right.
I have some UA colleagues that have been at SAP for 25 years, that kind of thing, right? So it is challenges that there's that ageism going on. I mean, no one on my team was no one was ever rude about it or anything like that, but I think my perception is always a bit more, well, what can they possibly want to know from me, because I'm just some young kid,
Hmm.
was always the mentality that I had. But at the end of the day, like, I think I can bring something to the conversation that's not, just because I don't have 25 years experience in software design doesn't necessarily mean I can't bring other things to the table as a manager, specifically on the people realm where I do have that experience, right? So yeah, it's definitely interesting to wrap your head around that as well. And for the junior employees, I find it quite a bit easier, because I can bring more to them, and I can share more with them, and not share more, but just there's more I can teach. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting for sure. It's definitely a learning curve.
For sure. Yeah. For me, it's more starting to be the opposite. So my managers start to be younger and younger, um, which is really interesting. And it's an interesting experience. For me, it's like sometimes also, I don't know, if I'm in a bad spot, I always think, what can this person, I don't know, what can this person teach me in that sense?
Yeah,
And then I
yeah,
have to remind myself, it's a different perspective. That person grew up with different things, if I look at my kids now, they grow up with iPads and phones, and their first reaction to a TV was walking towards the TV and trying to touch it and swipe and not figuring out that actually this thing now needs a remote, which is different from a touchscreen. But I obviously didn't grow up with these kind of things. So I think there's things I definitely can learn from people who are younger than me, but it takes time to adjust the mindset, I want to say.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think the opposite is true too. It takes time for me to adjust my mindset where trying to figure out, what can I bring to the table and what can I help this person with has been, it's been rewarding as well, right? To have a team and to we have these at SAP, we have these pulse checks every now and then with your manager, and it is really nice to see nice feedback. Maybe a bit more North American feedback than some of the German colleagues, but seeing positive feedback is quite nice, and it just goes to show that the time that you do spend with the employees goes a long way.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. But so getting back to management, it's not only that you manage your team, but you also need to manage expectations and people around you, right?
Totally.
Your peers, you have to manage up and down. And I remember you did this usually very well because you always were, what you're talking about. You're well prepared, the domain, the product, the customers, what they need, what they don't need. So is there anything, or how do you deal with other people? How do you manage not your team, but outside of your team?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, right? Like as you, or at least for me, as I've moved up into management and leadership to some degree, it's, you move farther away from the actual mock-ups and details of design, right? And my job now is primarily just stakeholder management, whether that be customers, whether that be product management, development. They're all stakeholders in this kind of game that you're playing constantly, right? I think our team has grown substantially over the last, I'd say 6 years or so. We went from being very much a lipstick service, where development would come to us after the fact and say, hey, make this look good, and we'd slap some colors on and whatever, right? And now we're very much integrated. I think, it is hard being in a development-focused company and trying to be a design team, but we've definitely grown to the point now where we, have a say on the roadmap, and it's not just, okay, well, development defines this and we're just working on it. We can discuss and determine where the gaps are. We're involved in those conversations, and so for sure. I mean, it's a large part of the job, and I think one of the things I was recently talking to my manager about was I was like, oh man, all I feel like I do is say no. Like I feel like all I've been doing lately is stopping things from happening. And she was kind of saying like, well, that's not a bad thing, right? I think as the design lead, you need to be the eyes and ears for the product. And me personally, I tend to like to solve problems that are more widespread and more holistic to the application rather than the minor details or the minor interactions. So I'm constantly looking at the areas of the application that I'm responsible for, and even outside my responsibility, and trying to see where the pieces fit in, and trying to align I would say the information architecture as to be as simple as possible, right? And I think that's so when people are now, when there's a development team or a product management team that has a roadmap that has a feature that's, maybe similar to something else that's going on, I feel like all I've been doing right now is going, no, you can't do that because this is happening over here and this is happening over here. And, and so it's never that easy or that smooth to make those alignments happen. But yeah, it's a constant battle for sure, just to make sure that we're not duplicating effort. We're not, we're going in the right direction. We're working on the stuff that's really going to move the bar forward, and that aligns with our company goals, right? And I think one of the things that happens quite a bit at SAP is development teams tend to work in silos in their specific areas of operation, right? And it's a lot easier for them to work in their own little bubble because they don't have to rely on anyone else for any kind of cross architecture, right? So what tends to happen is things get developed very similar, but not quite similar enough in many different ways. And whether that's from, a shortcoming of the design team, or whether it's just, product management or whoever driving the roadmap, it is something that I'm trying to be more conscious of and trying to align people on. And I think, one of the greatest things you can do as a designer, like the only job as a designer really is to communicate an idea, right? And whether that be on a piece of paper or whether that be on Sketch or Figma or whatever tool you're using, the only goal goal is to align people and communicate and, get people to align towards a certain goal, right? And by showing them, like, they say pictures worth 1,000 words, as cliche as it is, it's true, right? And so looking at those silos and trying to bring those teams together and try to show them the way forward is definitely something that we're constantly striving for. And yeah, I would say one of the most challenging things. I just worked for an entire year on a project that just got, not a project, but a piece of the application that just got canned because now it's no longer a priority. But
Ouch.
it took so long to align everyone and get everyone to agree, and then we start development and then it gets shifted, and that's hard. That's super hard. But I would rather not have something in the application than have 4 or 5 half-baked things, right? So it's kind of like do it right the first time. I mean, we can't all be perfect, but from my experience, at least within the company, is to like it's hard to iterate on things because there's so many topics that we're trying to tackle all at once that that minimum viable experience is crucial. And if it's not right, then I'd rather not ship something at all than ship something that's not going to be usable, right? So
yeah, it's true. Yeah, silos. Talking about silos, I remember I was working at a company years ago, and in a big office, like 1,000 people or so here in Berlin. And one day, after a couple of, I want to say months working on something, we figured out that there was another team at the other end of the office building pretty much the same thing.
Oh yeah.
It's fantastic, wonderful. Now what? So yeah, silos, I guess, exist almost everywhere. And
totally.
Yeah. So and I think what you said earlier, saying no, actually, I agree. Saying no is a great thing, actually. And I think usually people are afraid of saying no. Somebody comes to a desk, asks for something, especially junior people tend to say yes to maybe please somebody or just do some more work in that sense. Mm-hmm. But I think, as you said, saying no is very important to stay aligned. And as Steve Jobs said, like focus means saying no. So it's like, exactly, you say no to many things because on the other side, as soon as you say no to something, you say yes to something else.
Totally. Yeah, and that's just it, right? I mean, otherwise we'd have our we'd have a product landscape that would be so confusing and hard to use from the consumer standpoint, just because there'd be too many options, right? Like too many choices to do the same thing. Sometimes it's a bit overwhelming, and that's it's actually I mean, this is kind of some backstory, but like I think what some junior designers don't really understand is just when you're a junior designer, all you're thinking about is design, right? And you're trying to solve the problem with the best set of skills you have, which at the time is design skills. Right. And one thing that makes in my mind makes a junior designer from a senior designer is the ability to take in other contexts, right? So understanding what the maturity level of the product is, understanding how the market's unfolding, right? And because there's in any job, like at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is make money, right? And so there's an opportunity to many things, and there's specific moments when some things are potentially more important to do than others, right? And as everyone always jokes, that SAP is kind of like the biggest startup in the world, just because it's a gigantic company filled with a bunch of tiny companies all fighting for buy-in, right, or for money from SAP to continue development. And when we first started the product we work on right now, we very much were taking shortcuts to show progress. And as a designer, that's really frustrating because you're not building out components, you're not making everything scalable, and it's super, super frustrating. But I think understanding that if you don't do that, then you won't have a job or a product to work on in 4 months is a real, it's a real thing that you have to deal with. And I think that's often what you don't see as a junior designer, right? So you're getting frustrated about things that yes, they are frustrating, and yes, we're dealing with them now. We're refactoring a lot of our code, but if we didn't do it the way we did it, we wouldn't be where we are today, right? So there's always these choices you have to make, and being able to see the big picture of that is also super valuable, and bring into having that lens from the business side, having that lens from the marketing perspective. All these pieces make you a stronger designer.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, as you say, it's not only about design, it's all the things around it, having all the knowledge about who are our users actually, why are they coming to us, why are they using our product, what other products are there in the market we are in besides our product, how do they work, why do people choose their product over ours, and then how do they behave in the product. There's a lot of things I find. Yeah, if you're a junior, you most likely don't think about it. You expect somebody hands you a task, you do the task, good job, next task kind of thing, But then
Yeah.
which is fair, and that's what I mean. That's totally normal. We all start somewhere, at the bottom as a junior, and we are there to learn, and that's what we do, all the way up. We keep learning, which is fantastic. And as you said earlier, everything comes with challenges. Whenever we move up, there's a different kind of challenge. So we have to prepare and learn again, which is great. Otherwise, things would be boring, I guess.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, you were still at SAP when we started essentially the matrix for the design team and the development career path, right? That's something that we
Yes.
didn't really have as a design team at SAP, just because it's a very development focused organization, right? And so we had SAP has standardized career paths for many parts of the organization, right? Like HR or finance or whatever, right? Sales. But design
Right.
was very much following the development path, which is quite a bit different. And we were always lumped in with them. And I think, it was me, you, and a couple others, and we designed that career path for the designers, which we still use today to some degree. And at the heart of it, it was really just a five prong approach where design was just one facet of that, right? And
Right.
the rest were, like you just said, like domain skills is huge, and business knowledge and all these other facets of the job that, you could be the best designer in the world and still not be able to, to make an impact if you can't communicate your ideas, or if you can't negotiate with other stakeholders, right? And that it's huge. It comes into play. Everyone's so focused on, oh, how do I get my design skills better? I need to go to this design conference so I can be a better designer. Well, that's not really. I'd rather send you to maybe you should go to a course in financial planning. That's potentially
Right.
more valuable to you in this job, right? And especially now, I find the UX team acts quite a bit. We have to act on behalf of the user, right? Who's not always obviously
Right.
in the room. So trying to understand their job and what they're trying to do as much as possible is huge. And developers, they really, they're there to write code and put into code what we've done. And if we don't have the knowledge to really make good decisions about what the user's trying to do and how they're trying to accomplish that task, and I think it's never going to work out. So I think the demands on designers these days are quite high to understand a lot of knowledge, specifically at SAP. It's very detailed business knowledge where potentially you might not need to know if you're a designer elsewhere. Maybe working on design system, or maybe working on some facet of visual design is not maybe as important as it is in other companies, right? So
For sure. Yeah, and then I totally agree with you. What you mentioned earlier, the metrics for the designer's career path, because this is something I still keep referencing when I talk to other people, and I think because I still think it's great. It's fantastic. I want to say it's simple enough to understand and to communicate, but it's tangible enough at the same time to really understand where can I improve. What is there? What else can I do? How can I move up in my career as a designer?
totally.
And I must say, in my 20 plus years, I've never had that before. In any role there was no clear path for anything. I mean, you had a job and you were working on something, and somehow most of the times things fell into place or not.
Yeah. No,
But nobody
sure.
would tell you, I mean, hopefully you had a manager who would give you some advice, oh, you need really to get better at this thing or this thing. But often very, very, I don't know, not very tangible,
Yeah, and I think too, it's interesting you say that, because I mean, when I first started at SAP, the team had been there for years and years and years, and not that I wasn't by any means senior at this point. I just started my career, but you're kind of looking around going, okay, if I want to ever progress in this job, I need to wait for someone to leave, because I mean, that's kind of how it was, right? And because like you said, there was no path forward, right? It was always okay, you're going to be a junior designer, and then once you hit this milestone of whatever 5 years, which is, I don't know, kind of ridiculous, assigning a time to a certain promotion, then you become a senior designer, and then that's it. That's your whole career just done, like two progressions, right? Um,
Wonderful.
yeah,
Perfect. Yeah, that's true. No, but seriously, I mean, this is something which is really good, and I think more companies should have that, and I think more people should actually demand to have something like this. And as you mentioned earlier, especially now during the pandemic, to me, it's almost like it's probably a bad example, but I read one day that during like the holiday times, Christmas and so on, most of divorces happen, and I was like, why is that happening? And apparently it's because, people have time and they have time to reflect and they have time to think about stuff. And then they realize, I'm actually in the wrong spot in my life. I don't want to be in this kind of relationship. And then they get a divorce. It's like, wow, to me, that was mind blowing.
Yeah,
I never even
Yeah.
thought about this kind of angle. And I think something similar or kind of similar is happening because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Because people realize, they're now at home. They don't see the people anymore they used to see during the day. It's like this is like this whole level is missing basically. And then they start realizing, is this thing what I'm doing here actually the thing I want to do? And I feel like many people realize, no, it's not, And then if you don't have like this kind of career path thing, at least at the very minimum, that like, I'm on the right path, I will improve here and there, and then a couple of years, I step up here and there, If you don't even have that, what do you have? What holds you at the company? You can work remotely for somebody else, no problem at all, right?
Totally. Yeah, no, we're seeing that a lot. I mean, I was fortunate enough to hire many of the people I went to school with at SAP. I had some really, really good friends there, and not just like work friends, like friends that I've had for years before work. And now that, some of them have moved on and others are, like you just mentioned, pandemic hits, you don't see them for 2 years, and you say, okay, well, if friends and the team was the only thing keeping me at the job, then why am I still here, right? Like if I think my dad always says there's five aspects to your job, right? Like one is your manager, one is how much you make, one is the team, one is the content you're working on, and by the life of me, I can't forget the last one. But you have to have at least 3 of those things going for you to want to stay in a position, right, or stay at a role. And so yeah, I think, like you just said, you hit the pandemic, all of a sudden you lose the team that you're working with and the engagements you have every day. Maybe the content isn't that interesting. Maybe you don't even talk to your manager anymore because they're remote. I don't know, right? And then you ultimately you wake up one day and you say, oh, well, I guess I don't really need to do this, right? So,
right.
Yeah, crazy.
It is crazy. I mean, for me, thinking about the pandemic, it's still, I don't know. I don't know where the last year and a half went. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like yesterday was January and it's, it's so late already in the year. I'm like, what did I do the last 10 months or so?
Totally.
I don't even know. So yeah, I totally see how people feel in a similar way and see, okay, this is, this doesn't make any sense. Let's do something else instead.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think, we had this conversation a while back before you left. I remember we went and grabbed a coffee at JJ being there, but
yeah,
just in talking to you about, like, most of the team that I work with, right, they're all quite young, I would say. Like, they're, at least millennials, or if not younger. And everyone jokes that millennials don't want to work hard. But I don't think that's true. But I think what happens is, we're constantly, as millennials, and having access to information, 24/7 in your phone and whatever, and everyone knows how bad that can be for people's anxieties as well. But I think, it is like, we're getting this constant doomsday scenario blasted at us, right? Whether it's global warming or whatever else, and then the pandemic finally hit, right? And it's like just another thing on top of everything else that goes on in the world, and yeah, and people just were over it, right? And I think during the pandemic, not just people realized, if they like their job or not anymore, but they really started to understand how they could, how you can really work and balance your life at the same time, which is something that I don't think people were getting the opportunity to really do before, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was always, okay, well, I have to go to work 9 to 5, and then I can leave and do something else, right? And I've always been an advocate for making sure that the people are happy. And, I've always told my team, I don't care really what you're doing or when you're doing it, as long as you get your work done on time, and you're showing up to meetings and you're responsible, your responsibilities are clear. Like, I don't really care if you're doing that at 9 p.m., if you're doing that at 2 in the morning, if you want to, not show up to work until noon because you don't have any meetings, but, you get your work done, like, that's totally fine with me. And I think the pandemic's really open that option up for a lot of people, right? And people to take midday breaks to do their laundry or whatever they need to do, right?
Yeah.
People are starting to learn how to balance their work and their life together a little bit more, and I'm interested to see how that will change actually, going back to work. I know even some of my friends who worked for companies that are now kind of demanding that they go back to the office, they've just quit because they say, no, like I can find a job elsewhere that's more flexible and offers me the things that offers me the flexibility so I can work and live and enjoy my life. And they're just kind of, moving out of those more potentially, popular jobs before the pandemic are now maybe seen as a bit less popular,
Yeah, for sure. I can totally see how people would do that, because having the flexibility to work from home can be good. I mean, depends on one's home, I guess.
Good and bad. Yeah, totally.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're seeing a lot of people very, excited to go back to the office to see people and to get in the swing of things again. But I think there is still this underlying layer of, well, I'm going back to the office because I can, not because I have to, right? And the hours are more flexible now, and so there is this layer as well. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm curious to see, how much of a return to full time, it'll be once we're kind of over the pandemic. But I still think it's going to be quite a while till we're there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm already worried about autumn and winter, Having two kids, it's always like the cold season when everybody starts sniffling around and you don't know, do they have a cold, the flu, or something worse?
Yeah,
and then everybody
totally.
gets very jumpy. And yeah, I don't know. So crossing my fingers that globally things are getting back. I don't want to say back to normal, but back in order to a degree at least, slowly. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, no kidding, eh? Jeez, it's been yeah, I don't know. It's been a while. I think everyone's sort of adapting right now, but geez, it's definitely a struggle. Something that I never thought I'd have to experience in my lifetime. But just another thing, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. I think nobody expected that somehow,
Yeah,
or maybe some
totally.
did, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. So talking about the pandemic, what do you do to take a break from work from the pandemic, if at all possible? I know you're doing some cycling. What are you doing?
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually struggled for quite a while because, yeah, as you know, I'm a proficient cyclist. I race kind of the top level here in North America, and it keeps me busy, but it also keeps my mind at ease. I think for many people, some kind of activity or athletics is really good at relieving stress, right? And so you have a bad day or you have a stressful meeting, you can go for a run or cycle or whatever else, right? And I actually got injured in November
Oh, no.
overtraining because I was so like pent up from the pandemic that I was doing so much activity and so much exercise that I just kind of blew up and it actually put me, it really was unfortunate because I had no outlet for anything and it was driving me crazy because I couldn't relieve stress. It was absolutely insane. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know how I got through that, but I'm finally back riding again and being active, which is nice. And yeah, so my thing is usually, I'm working with European time zones, so I'm usually up at 5:45 for calls starting at 6, and then I usually work until about 11 when most of the European time zones are done for the day, and then I take a long break. To be honest, like I don't return to work until probably 2 or 2:30, just because I have the break. I'm absolutely fried. Like I don't care who you are, you can't focus for 8 hours straight without some kind of break, right? And so I usually go for a bike ride, eat my lunch, do whatever, grab a coffee, and then by the time I get back in the afternoon, maybe some more calls with the folks in Vancouver, and then the day kind of, you might carve out some time to do some actual work or some tangible work as we discussed before. But
Right.
yeah, that's kind of how it is, to be honest. I mean, I do have some colleagues in India and Shanghai as well, which makes it really challenging when you have those late days. But but then I just will take a bigger break in the middle of the day. I think like having the opportunity to get out, especially when it's living in the northern hemisphere, it's dark, and a lot of months it's dark either before work or after work, right? So now with the ability to get out and be outside when it's light out is a huge benefit. And not having to, not that like before, I've never really had an issue with any of my managers being like, oh, like you must be at your desk, 8 hours a day. But now that like no one's, like you have that freedom without anyone looking poorly at you, right? Because there's always that perception when you're not at your desk or you're not visible. And our team, our design team was never like that. So, as you know, when we had that little design pod there, like it was pretty come and go, right? There was people always up and about meetings or in the office, not in the office, whatever. But I think the perception from other teams, like the development teams in the office, or maybe some of their product management teams, were always like, "Whoa, these UX people don't work very hard because they're never at their desks," which is totally untrue,
and they
right?
laugh all the time,
yeah, and they're so loud, and all they do is talk to each other, blah blah blah. No, it's totally not true, and it's tough. I think it's really tough. For me, it was really tough being at work and working because, you cannot do a design task for 30 minutes between two meetings, right? There's absolutely nothing you can do other than check your email or talk to somebody or sync with somebody. There's nothing you can do in 30 minutes, like absolutely not, right? So, I mean, I was going for coffees like 4 times a day between all my meetings because it was a good chance to catch up with somebody on the team or to chat about something, work related or not. And you just kind of go and grab a coffee. But like that is being productive, because you have a design task to do. You need at least, 2 hours to settle into that task and that problem solving space, right? And like mentally, I think one of the most challenging things for me is the topic switching, going from one meeting to the next, and constantly having to switch topics, and not just like with people, but with, the content that they're working on and all these pieces of the product. And I find, to be honest, I do most of my work like late at night when my wife's gone to bed and everyone's sleeping, because it's the only time you have to think, because during the day, like even with the pandemic, like it's a bit easier now because I can just block my calendar for half the day and say, okay, no, I got to focus on this here or that there. But previously, like when I was in the office, it was so hard because even if you did have that 2-hour chunk or that 3-hour chunk during the day where you didn't have any meetings, you had someone, there's always someone coming by your desk to say, hey, do you have a sec, or can I get your opinion on this, or whatever. And I, of course I'm not going to say, no, you cannot talk to me. But it's always been a challenge. So I actually feel like during the pandemic I've been more productive, even with more freedom, just because I've had the time to actually like carve out my day and not worry about someone messaging you or bugging you. You can just turn off your notifications, turn off email and whatever, and get the work done you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I think having something, as an outlet is really important. I'm doing some yoga sometimes, and that really helps, to calm down and to focus on, or to remind myself to focus on what is really important,
Totally.
Especially during the pandemic. And yeah, some sports here and there as well, but yeah, I'm definitely not as sporty as you are.
No, yeah, it's all good.
And will never be.
Yeah, you need something though, and I think like you just mentioned, like focusing on what actually is important is also, like you said, it's huge. And sometimes I get so frustrated or so stressed out. And at the end of the day, like my wife will come home and she's a veterinarian, so she used to come home and after a bad day for her is like someone's animal died and she had to tell them that their beloved family member has passed away. But for me, like a bad day is that someone yelled at me in a meeting or someone didn't like my design, and at the end of the day, like that's really not that bad, in the comparison of things. So I think it's trying to take everything with a grain of salt and realize that other people that you're talking to have other lives too, right? And understanding that context is huge, especially during a pandemic. I think, talking to people, especially early in the pandemic, and having, intense conversations or intense design meetings or something, you have to realize that people are, everyone's stressed, right? So, and everyone might not have the outlet that you have to get rid of that stress. So they might just be taking it out on work, right? And it's something to keep in mind, that I still keep in mind even now, because you don't know what people's homes are like during a pandemic. Some people might, have 10 kids running around, no daycare, you have no idea.
Right.
So just trying to keep that in mind and be as pleasant as possible, even if you're having a tough conversation, right? So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, that definitely puts things in perspective. You're absolutely right. Yeah, it was really nice talking to you, Brett. Is there any place where we can send people to find more out about you?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I mean, probably just LinkedIn. You can look me up there. Yeah, or if you have Strava, the cycling network, you can look me up there as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I used to have a website kicking around, but it's been a while since I got that up to date. So
Sounds good. I will put links to that in the show notes. Brett, thank you so much again. It was a pleasure talking to you, catching up with you, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
yeah, thanks, Wolfgang. Nice chat to you as well, and maybe I'll be to Berlin soon, and we'll have a coffee or something.
Yeah, you should come. We have a guest room, so you can stay, no problem.
Perfect.
Thanks so much for listening. We really hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, would you give us a rating on iTunes? It really makes a difference, and we'd truly appreciate it. Got any questions? Then get in touch by following us on Twitter @Pixelish_HQ. Thanks again for listening. I'm Wolfgang Bremer, and this was Pixelish.